Hey, it's JT,
And Mike.
hosts of Brew Crime.
And we've got some exciting news for you.
Mark your calendars for July 12th to 14th, 2024.
We're heading to the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival in Denver, Colorado, and you won't want to miss it.
Are you worried about costs? Fear not. This festival is designed with you in mind, an affordable experience without sacrificing quality.
There are no inflated costs, just a weekend packed with authenticity, education, and networking.
Have you ever wished for genuine one-on-one interactions with your favorite creators? Well, now is your chance.
Save 15% off your ticket price by using the code BREWS at checkout.
You know, those things you need after listening to us for an hour? Well, at least me.
We hope to see you there and let them know.
Brew Crime sent you. Head over to truecrimepodcastfestival.com.
Welcome to Brew Crime, the podcast where we drink brews, talk crime, conspiracies, or whatever catches our attention. This is Mike and my co-host.
Another glorious morning makes me sick. It's JT.
The Wicked Witch of the JT.
The entire time I was doing that, you all can't see this, but Mike was like, where's this going? Where is he going with this? I don't know. And that's okay because I didn't either.
Yes. I couldn't see behind the curtain.
There, I can't even see behind my own curtain. So we're good.
Oh my.
Oh, jeez. How are you, sir?
I'm pretty good, you know? I'm
Yeah.
sad that I'm not on holiday anymore because that was fun.
Right? It looked fun.
It's always fun when you go to Disneyland and Universal Studios and, go meet Disney princesses and go get close to dinosaurs,
Okay. That's true. That worked real well in Jurassic Park. It's going to be a great day. We're going to get close to.
Yeah. Oh, God.
No, that's Chewbacca. Never mind.
Hey, I saw Chewbacca too.
You did. I couldn't tell which one was which.
Yeah, exactly. He's got less gray.
That's that's dyed. That's dyed, right?
True. That's a
Chewie's
lot of dye.
absolutely. Chewie looks like a white poodle now at this point.
Probably.
His is more. That's that.
Hopefully, he
I'm
doesn't
sorry.
stroke out in the middle of a conversation.
ASMR warning. ASMR warning.
Oh God!
Can you imagine a Star Wars ASMR just?
Pew 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 pew.
Woo!
Oh man, that was good.
We've lost the
How
plot.
Yes. And how are you, sir?
I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm certainly not as gassy as Trump in the courtroom, so I'm doing all right. I'm doing real good. Can you with an ego as big as his, that's as fragile as his is? Not only is he in a courtroom, apparently, thankfully, having a terrible experience being talked about, and he can't control it, but also it has been revealed that the man is gassy as hell.
Oh man.
Like the entire courtroom just filled with it. And I was like,
Oh.
like she's a narcissist too, but poor Melania.
She's just riding those coattails.
She's riding waves. They're just not very good smelling.
No.
Oh,
Waves of odor.
So yeah,
all right.
That tells you how my day is. My bar is, well, I'm not as gassy as him. That's my bar. So
Perfect.
yeah. But I'm kind of excited because we're talking about witches.
Yes. But not those witches.
No.
Not the ones everyone talks about.
Right. We're talking yes, correct. Wait, what?
Salem.
Right, not those. Thank you. I was like, wait, is there another? Wait, did we talk about this? Was I supposed to research a different kind of like? Were we just talking about mean people? I had a moment, but okay. So, because I ran into some witches and they said that I was looking good and I had enough meat on my bones, I'm trying to diet. That's my segue to that. So, I don't have a beer with me tonight. I do, however, have water. So, that's my safety net.
Ah, yes, you've got
Yes,
sadness with you.
I know. It's just crime tonight with me, not brew crime, just crime. I won't make it a habit, but I do want to get to a certain point. So, my case tonight is called It's Not Good to Be the First in Everything, wink, unless it's witch trials. So, when we decided to do this theme, I thought, what more could possibly be done? We've had myths, music, art, poetry, and dedicated all. It's all been dedicated to the topic. So there's so many dang pieces about witches, and it increased exponentially once Harry Potter came out
Yes.
of the closet. Nope, sorry, that's my fan fiction. Don't even get me started on Hocus Pocus. I mean, I love the movie. That's a great movie. It's a great film, certainly a product of the 90s, but just so much. Without being said, I ended up finding out some things that, well, I didn't know. Admittedly, I didn't know much, but I don't, usually I don't put together these kind of cases for me, but for the audience, and in this case, it was time to go back to the books. I had to, like, there was a lot to read. Um, but hey, Mike,
Yes.
how do you make a witch scratch?
I don't know.
You take out the W. No, no. Okay. Wait. What do
Mm,
witches in Australia ride?
don't know.
Broomerangs.
Oh.
Okay, now that I've got that out of my system, what I wanted to do was share just a little information regarding witches throughout history, kind of first and foremost. And we're not going to like go back in time. But what I'm going to do is encapsulate this in four beliefs right now and whether they're true or false. So the first one's that witches were actually witches, which is almost entirely a myth, right?
Yes.
From 1450 to 1750, 90,000 women and men were accused of witchcraft in Europe. Half of them were executed. Um,
Jesus.
right? The majority of those killed didn't even identify as witches.
Of course not.
And a small group of those worked as cunning people, or rather, the village wise man or woman. People consulted them about healing, finding lost or stolen goods, healing, bewitchment. Sometimes they could
Yeah.
practice for decades and wouldn't even know that they were there. Um, and witchcraft in Europe was associated with the devil rather than being cunning. And it was the devil from which, people believed witches obtained their power. Um, Now, people in Europe, they did practice some like basic, magic, but they also did harmful magic as well because examples of dolls and animal hearts pierced with pins have been discovered.
Oh my.
Yeah, right. But for the most part, people were accused because of an interpersonal conflict, not because they actually practiced. And that seems to be a theme throughout. So witches weren't witches. The second one's that witches were women. Yes and no. Um, Women were more likely to be accused and executed, but
Yeah.
men also could be as well. In some countries, they were more likely to be accused. So in Iceland, 90% of the people being accused as being witches were male, and that's the same with Russia and Estonia.
Interesting.
Yeah, but like for the most part, those accused were women. England, 90%. Holy Roman Empire, oh my, imagine that,
Yeah.
76%. Um,
So holy.
she has a mole, a witch.
Murder.
So like, and parts of France, it's 76%. Men and women were both called witches. Men were sometimes accused of practicing more learned magic, like conjuring demons, but women were as well. So it was kind of like the only place where men and women were equal,
She
minus the
turned
whole,
me into a newt. I
I
got
got
better.
a newt. I missed a real good opportunity to put some of those jokes in here.
Yes, you did,
Too
sir.
bad. So the third beliefs that Wiccan and pagan traditions continue earlier beliefs and practices. And while the answer is no, it's complicated. The biggest difference between those accused of witchcraft in the past and those who practice it today is that those today identify as witches. Those in the
Yes.
past did not. They didn't practice witchcraft, nor were they any part of any underground religious movement. Some did practice magic that was harmful, but the concept of witches and covens, such was, it was all in their heads. This was all in their heads.
Of course it was.
So, you know, we're not talking about different countries. We're talking about my great state of Virginia, which is getting lesser and lesser every day. So, during a 104-year
Make
period,
Virginia Stone Age again.
dude, yes. Make it shenanigan age again. I, were you the one who posed? I saw this the other day. If you let them shenan once, they're gonna shenan again.
Nope, I didn't, and I love it.
It's one of my favorites. Okay. For the past 2 days. So during a 104-year period from 1626 to 1730, Virginia witch trials had been documented. There were at least 15 people, 13 women and 2 men, that were accused of witchcraft in Virginia. Uh, and and those numbers are low, and there's a good reason for that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I actually found a dissertation about witchcraft in Chesapeake,
Holy shit.
which, yeah, it's like 200 pages. I did not read the whole thing, but I did get a good amount of information, and I will bring that into this because um it brings about some really cool thoughts that I didn't put together. So, uh you know, I am so sorry, Salem, but Virginia was the first colony to have a formal accusation of witchcraft. So
Take that.
my bad. But it was in 1626, and Virginia had the first formal witch trial in 1641. And because we're early to the mark, but super late to learn better, it was the location of the last witchcraft trial in 1730. So we
Oh
were the
wow.
first and the last.
Damn.
um, so it's really important to know that there are plenty of files and records missing regarding trials and witchcraft and things like that. Why? Because of the Civil War. Because of course it was. It's really sad that those records were lost. I think that there was a lot that we could have gleaned from that.
Oh yeah.
In terms of how Virginia did a lot of things regarding like the court system and justice, and it would have been really interesting to read those transcripts in terms of the arguments that were being posed. It just would have been cool, but they're gone. Witchcraft was a solid concern for Virginia colonials. I mean, of course it was devil this and devilish that. But the reality is that they weren't so much worried about that, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Um, they brought their belief in the devil with them to the New World. The devil, his power, demons, all of it, including witches.
Of
They believe,
course.
right? I mean, how else are you going to scare somebody to church? You know,
Yeah. They scared
um,
me away from it. I don't know.
I ran to the witches. Um,
Yes.
Uh, they believed in this reality before they even came to the Americas. Witch trials had been part of English life for centuries, and Parliament passed a law criminalizing the practice of witchcraft in 1542. So the folks who settled in the English colony at Jamestown considered it real and punishable. Of course, as we are wont to. So I'm saying this stuff because it is kind of a general theme, across the country, but
Hmm.
I will talk a little bit more about Virginia and why things were a little bit different there. And I think it'll actually make you kind of happy, Mike. So they're
Okay.
good things. I think it's interesting. Um, of course, as we're wont to do, we force these thoughts on things we don't know, the unknown. So they manifested in colonists' early views towards the indigenous of Virginia. Yep.
Of course. Yep. If you
And
can't kill them one way, you kill them another way, right? That's the way they
right.
did it.
So, their thought was they worshiped the devil because they didn't understand what was going on. Because the indigenous of Virginia totally knew who the devil was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's unfortunately just the way most Christians look. If you don't believe in their religion, you're devil
Oh
worshiper. And
yeah,
it's like, no, no, I don't believe there's a devil either.
right. So listen, the next one, two, three, the next three quotes that I share, do not sound clip me, please, because they're gonna make me sound like a terrible human being. I don't know why I even warned you. I shouldn't have said anything. Now people are thinking about it.
Now I'm
Uh,
gonna clip it. No.
exactly. So Alexander Whitaker in 1613 said, quote, "The behavior of the native people makes me think that there be great witches among," he sounds like a pirate, "there be great witches among them, and that they are very familiar with the devil." I went from pirate to Macho Man Randy Savage.
Perfect.
Very familiar with the devil. John Smith described Powhatan as, quote, "more like devil than a man." You dick.
Fuck's sakes.
And then Edward L. Bond wrote, quote, "Colonial accounts of native bodies carried implications beyond mere physical descriptions. For English philosophy and theology linked body and spirit by suggesting that the exterior appearance of the body gave evidence of the interior state of the soul. And if that's the case, my soul is pretty fucked up." So around 1622, the colonists decided to press on from the indigenous, probably because they killed the majority of them with either sword, gun, or cough.
Yes. Or
The
blanket.
or or blanket. So they kind of turned the spotlight, and as their population grew, the spotlight turned within. If you don't have anybody to focus on externally out of your community, you begin to focus on people within to then have a group of pariahs, right? You have this group. So you create the group within. So in terms of the way that I kind of want to do this, I'm going to briefly go through the different trials of the witches who was accused and stuff like that because it is such a small number relatively.
Yeah.
But then we're going to kind of broaden the focus. That seems like oxymoronic. We're going to broaden what we talk about in terms of the state and kind of the cultural background of that because I think it's important to kind of understand where Virginia was seated back then. So in terms of the witches, in 1626, Joan Wright was the very first witch to be accused. She was a goodwife or a midwife in Surrey County, which is probably like 2.5 hours from me. We'll just put it this way: a lot of these places that I talk about are like an hour or just a little bit more, maybe from me. So it's really interesting
Damn.
to, yeah. Um, so she was the first person of any of the colonies to be accused of witchcraft. She was a healer, and most likely, we mentioned this before, a cunning woman, somebody who practiced like low level magic. This combined with the fact that she was audible gasp left handed. Um,
I mean, shit, they thought they were witches up until like the 90s, so
it's true.
1990s, I mean.
It's flipping true. Um, it
Use these fucking right-handed scissors or else.
yeah. But it made her untrustworthy by superstitions of the day. It made her an oddity. Accusers claim that she had accurately predicted the deaths of at least 4 of her neighbors, bewitched livestock and crops, and cast a spell that killed a newborn baby.
I guess there's a new way to figure out if someone's a witch. Look at the undersides of their hands. Is there ink on the left hand? Burner!
Poor lefties. Um, ugh. The world was not built for you.
No, it was not.
So even though she was accused, she never faced trial. Nobody actually knows if she faced punishment, but records do show that at some point she was fined for an unspecified act. Now, what's really interesting is that the folks that are fined in these trials, it's so early that they were fined pounds of tobacco.
I love it. That's bizarre.
In the
That's actually
case of
really
her,
expensive in Canada now.
yeah, right? I mean, just the tax, the fine for her for that unspecified act we don't know about was 100 pounds of tobacco, which
Wow.
seems exorbitant, to be honest,
Yeah,
but
that
maybe
sounds
not.
very expensive.
Maybe not. I don't know. In 1641, Mrs. George Barker, sorry, Mrs. George Baker, was the first known actual trial that took place. And this took place in Norfolk in 1641. She was accused of witchcraft by Jane Rookins of, quote, lower Norfolk, which I would assume was across the water, although the
Below it?
exact charges are not really known. Yeah, I grew up in that area. So like I'd go to Norfolk for like concerts and hockey games and stuff. So
Nice.
yeah, but no witch
Norfolk and way.
trials. Yeah, no,
Norfolk way.
the people in Norfolk pronounce it Norfolk.
Norfolk.
So
That's it. Norfolk. That's it.
Norfolk. So in the end, she was acquitted of all charges. The person who accused her was later recorded as saying she was sorry for what she said.
Oh my God.
As compensation, Rookin's husband, George, was required to pay her court charges and the other expenses, which I can only imagine what that conversation was like. I,
Yes.
t- I told you, Jane, keep your mouth. Don't, you didn't need to do this. It's like just that conversation the whole way to the courthouse to pay.
He just
Um,
points at his wife. Witch.
which can you imagine? Okay, in my head, this is the scene. They're in the courtroom. The judge is looking at Jane. Jane is looking at what did I say his name was? George? Yeah, George. And the judge is like, "You are being sentenced to paying for her court costs." And then Jane looks at the judge, and then she looks at George, and George looks at her, and then back to the judge, and George goes, "A witch! She's a witch! It's her! She's
Yep.
the witch!" Um, just perfect. Okay. In 1654, Catherine Grady was the so there was only in Virginia one person ever executed,
Wow.
and it didn't even happen in Virginia. She was on a ship headed to the Americas from England. So, because the end port was in Virginia, it became a Virginia issue. So, violent storms were brewing up during their trip, and of course, it's not the weather; it's a witch.
Of course.
Yeah, let's make everybody feel
Completely
better.
reasonable.
Let's have a good old witch hunt on the ship.
Yeah.
It's like you're in one of those trap rooms, you know, and you've got to find out who's the witch.
Yeah. I sure hope it wasn't a witch burning, because if it's a wooden ship, that would go really poorly.
No, no, that is not what happened. So, Catherine was older. She seemed a pretty good candidate for sorcery, because why not? She's older.
Yeah.
So they didn't burn the witch. They hung her at sea. That surprisingly wasn't even close to being helpful. Um, the storm still happened.
Of course.
So in 1656, you had William Harding, Reverend David Lindsay, a Scottish immigrant who had witnessed many witch trials in his home country, accused another man, William Harding, of witchcraft. Harding was found guilty of the charges and was sentenced to 13 lashes of the whip and ordered to leave the
Oh.
county. But
Can I leave first and then get the whipping?
my thought was like, do you think he was awaiting sentence and thought the worst? And when it was passed down, the 13 lashes and leave the county, he was like, that's all right. Like,
That really sucks, but at least I'm not dead.
right, right. In 1657, Barbara Wingbow, charges are unknown, but she went to trial and was acquitted. 1659, Mistress Robinson, she was accused but never tried. She countersued, and her accuser, Anne Godby, was fined 300 pounds of tobacco and cask as compensation for slander.
Wow. I just worked it out too. For 20 cigarettes a pack, it's $15.51. And I Googled it, and there's 600 cigarettes in a pound. So a pound would cost $465 Canadian in BC.
A
So
pound
times that by, yeah,
times just 300. Why not?
139,590.
That's a lot of money.
That is. For the
I would,
useless math that is just so dumb.
why not? You know, I was really surprised that her accuser was fined for slander
Yeah.
because what that means is that 1959 laws gave more consideration to slander than Twitter does. So here we are.
Fake news.
Fake news. 1671, Mrs. Christopher Neal, resident of Northumberland County, accused but not tried. By the way, I'm not naming them. This is just how they were recorded at the time.
Yeah.
In terms of their first names. Some of them had them, some of them were named Mrs. Husband.
Mrs. Husband. Hi, Mrs. Husband.
I'm Mrs. Husband.
Hi, Mr. Wife.
Mr. Mom.
Yeah.
In 1675, Jane or Joan Jenkins, a resident of Norfolk, was accused but not tried. 1678, Alice Cartwright, a resident of Norfolk, was acquitted during her trial. 1679, Paul Cartel. I want to say Cartel, but I don't think it's Cartel. It might be. Not many records exist for this case, but he was accused of killing a man in Accomack County, and the condition of the corpse was sufficient to find him guilty of using witchcraft to commit the murder. So
Oh my
I,
God.
it seemed like it was like an add-on bonus to the actual murder charge, and they were like,
Yeah.
"This body looks," and really what it was probably just decomposing.
Oh, probably.
In 1694, Phyllis Money, loved the name because I'd be filling this wallet with money. Never. She was acquitted, but was accused of teaching her daughter and son-in-law how to be a witch and wizard and bewitching their horse. So obviously we need to ban books. A
Yeah.
countersuit. Hanover, suck it. Countersued her accuser, William Earl, for damages, but received nothing. 1695, Eleanor Morris, accused of sorcery by a neighbor in King and Queen County, a name which is a little on the nose. She was acquitted, but her husband countersued the accuser for defamation. In the end, the Morrises walked away with £500.
Of tobacco? No.
I think, yeah, no, I think it was money that time. 1698 to 1714, Grace Sherwood, the Witch of Pungo. Now, this is the most notable witch trial. Grace was from Princess Anne County and is the only Virginia woman to have been found guilty of witchcraft. In 1698, her neighbors accused her of, quote, bewitching their pigs to death and bewitching their corn, not the band. She was also accused of shape-shifting and flying, almost like they were just kind of added on since the first two things weren't enough. They were like,
Yeah.
what, shaking? Okay. So Sherwood and her husband brought defamation suits against the accusers, but they didn't win either case. Sherwood ended up standing trial in 1706 in the General Court of Virginia, which was in Virginia Beach. Justices decided to use the water test to determine whether she was guilty or innocent. Are you familiar?
Is that the one where they have to float and they're a
Oh
witch or
yeah.
whatever?
So
I
it
was just
involved.
gonna make a joke that did anyone at least do that?
Yep, yep. They did this one
Jesus
time.
Christ.
So if you don't know about the water test, it involved binding the person's hands and feet and tossing them into a body of water because it was thought the water was pure and the water would reject wishes if they would float, but if they sank, they weren't witches. So that's the
You die
thing. It's
either
like,
way.
yeah, you're screwed one way or another. You've either drowned or because nobody was in there waiting for you. Anyways, Sherwood floated, but unlike many places, she was imprisoned instead.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, so they put her in prison. She was released in 1714. You can kind of see how reticent Virginia was to execute. And again, we are going to talk about that at the end of this list.
Things change.
You're right. The more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yes.
It's just like all of America has become Salem now.
Yes.
So Mary, she's called Mary. That's all we know about her. She was the last known case of witchcraft in Virginia. She was accused of using it to find lost items and treasure. In other words, I accuse all the Bigfoot hunters of witchcraft.
So do I.
Oh, failed witchcraft because it hasn't worked yet.
It's true.
So she never received a formal trial, but she was sentenced to 39 lashes with a whip.
Ooh.
Not much else is known about this case, but it does showcase kind of the inconsistency of 17th and 18th centuries in terms of punishments and stuff.
Heck yeah.
Now, I know that was a lot, but it wasn't. It also wasn't. Not really. Salem kind of takes the cake on that one.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk just about a few more things, thanks to, like I mentioned, that dissertation, which is called The Cup of Ruin and Desolation, 17th Century Witchcraft in the Chesapeake, which I thought was like, hey, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Love when that happens. I did want to mention some of the points that this dissertation makes because I think it hits on some solid ideas and explains other things. So the first thing I wanted to do is kind of quote the dissertation. It says, when one thinks of the high mortality rates and skewed gender ratios, it should not come as a surprise that only one woman was executed in the South for practicing the black arts, where the Puritans saw women as the evil incarnation of Eve, and the Quakers saw women as similar to the same as men by everything but being equal. The early Southerners were just happy to see a woman. Um,
Maybe that's why there's so many problems in the South.
It's
They didn't
true.
have any.
I got one or two stats here where you're just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So one of the big points is that Southerners were not Puritans. While the Salem trials overshadowed the study of American witchcraft, it's assumed all English in North America shared the same beliefs about it. But that's not necessarily true. Outside of
Hmm.
Puritanism, colonists saw witchcraft as a practice, not a heresy. So,
Yeah.
what that, well, I'll tell you what that tells me in a second here. Quote, there were no demonic overtones in their minds, and in fact, some of their charms invoked Christian images. Since most of the Chesapeake colonists weren't Puritans, the model of witchcraft as a practice is more applicable to Southern witchcraft than it is to the Puritan model. So, what that tells me is that when religion was added to the, oh, I don't know, the state court system and included in the punishments, all of the executions happened.
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons. Um, because Virginia and Maryland were still English colonies under English law, whether it was a practice or heresy, witchcraft was still a crime. Uh, I feel like if this wasn't the case, I feel like for most of these people, they would have just been like, send it to Judge Judy. But, you know, so at some point, Bacon's rebellion, you think I would have written the date down, but Bacon's rebellion happened. Before this rebellion, accusations were of women from higher classes. After that, the upper class did more to marginalize the women who supported them, who supported Bacon. They demonized them. So those women didn't want to be involved in the lower, quote, lower class anymore. And the major consequence of this was that individuals tended to come from the same socioeconomic class, those who blamed and those who were blamed. And that was usually lower.
Hmm.
In terms of the social context of 17th century Chesapeake, one difference between Southern and Northern witchcraft was the absence of an emphasis on the relationship between religion and witchcraft in the South. So Southerners identified with being Christian, but their fervor wasn't really expressed as strongly as that of Puritans. They were kind of buffet Catholics or Christians. Um, they just kind of picked and choose
Nice.
when they went.
Went to the salad bar.
Yes, exactly. No, I'd definitely still be going. They were officially members of the Church of England, but their beliefs were more, quote, low church. Beliefs about witchcraft tended to arise from the lower classes, but then it was the intellectuals and upper class who codified them. Quote, authorities of the Chesapeake appear to be more humane and enlightened than the Puritans. Yet the Virginians are the same people who passed a law in 1619 making it a criminal offense to fire a gun while intoxicated, except at weddings and funerals. Um,
That is the fucking dumbest law I've ever heard of.
isn't it? But it does mean you can fire a gun intoxicated at weddings and funerals. So,
Yeah, that's why it's dumb. Yep.
right. I mean, if you want a 2-for-1 funeral, start firing guns drunk.
You know, I've
Yeah.
never really thought of Virginia as a banjo state, but get
Oh,
the banjos out.
no. It's like Banjo Light. We are the Diet Coke of the South. All right. We're kind of like the
Uh,
RC Cola. Like you don't really want to drink it, but if it's there, you're gonna pick it up.
better than
So,
nothing.
right. So, however, even in comparison with the penalties that were put out in England, Virginians were still super lenient, as you can see from those cases we just talked about. During the 17th century, there were over 300 crimes punishable by death in England, whereas only a handful of crimes such as mutiny or murder merited death in Virginia.
Huh.
Now, did this make Virginians, does this mean that Virginians were more lenient towards crime? Well, yes. Many criminals were actually sent, like low-hanging fruit criminals, were sent to Virginia as indentured servants.
Oh
So they
wow.
were indeed a tad more lenient. They were sent to end the troubles on the other side of the pond and to bolster the population in the new colony.
I guess he just wanted more slavery.
Well, yeah,
Indentured servitude, yeah.
we hadn't gotten to the, yeah, exactly. So, of the approximately 120,000 English men and women who migrated to Virginia in the 17th century, it's estimated that indentured servants outnumbered free immigrants by 3 or 4 to 1. That's a lot. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a chunk. And the majority of those immigrants were men or boys. Hence the phrase of they were just happy to see a woman, right? In fact,
Yep. That
I
sounds
read
awful.
I didn't put this in here, but I read that it was such the fact that a woman would get married, and when that guy inevitably died, they would go to marry somebody else, and then illness, which was running rampant at that time, that person so somebody could be married as many as 5 times. Some weddings happening the day after the funeral,
Oh
just because of
jeez.
just because. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's probably and as late as 1650, somebody estimated that 1/3 of the settlers died in the first year in the colony.
Oh,
So just
wow.
yeah, a lot of people dying, worried about population, and that's probably the big reason why they weren't quick to slice and dice, both
Yeah,
literally and
makes sense.
figuratively. Quote, where a class may have played a role in an English judge's decision, class based on conspicuous material wealth was virtually non existent in early Virginia and Maryland. Furthermore, the transportees' experiences as convicts must have colored the decisions as to the degree of punishment warranted by the crime. The close contacts of the Virginians had living on plantations and on the frontier led them to have more intimate contact with one another, and it must have been harder for Virginia judges to impose a harsh penalty on someone they knew they knew well than it was for an English judge to impose a heavy sentence on a complete stranger. These are these are all things that, upon first glance at Virginia's witch trials, I was like, geez, nobody died. But looking at this makes
Yeah.
sense. It explains a lot. Edward Boyd writes, quote, for a settlement with a death rate approaching 85%, any colonist, no matter how base, was a treasure to be maintained. For the colony's survival rested upon keeping Virginia populated and putting men to work at tasks that would make the venture pay, so that investors would risk more capital on the empire.
That's
They're
just crazy. That
right.
that number of death.
It's insane. So, therefore, Virginia judges had to weigh the criminal's threat to the community against his or her labor and defensive values. So, what does it come down to? It comes down to population makeup. It comes down to death rates, money, and investors, and the religiousness of the region, really. Um, so, the last witch trial, like I said, was held in 1730 in Virginia. The same year, Ben Franklin published a satirical report of a witch trial in the Pennsylvania Gazette, which signaled a shift in the public's perception and acceptance of witchcraft and embraced deism, which actually emphasized reason and rejected the supernatural.
Ooh.
In terms of the legacy of Virginia witch trials, in 2006, Governor Tim Kaine informally pardoned Grace Sherwood 300 years after her conviction. The mayor of Virginia Beach declared July, I think it's 1st, to be known as Grace Sherwood Day. In Pongo, Virginia, Sherwood is an honorary official of the neighborhood's annual Strawberry Festival. We threw you in a lake and said, don't float, and now you get a Strawberry Festival.
Oh my.
It's
Should have named the
stories like
lake
this where
after
I'm
her.
just like, no wonder there are hauntings.
Yeah, right?
So there's also a statue of her that was erected in Virginia Beach in 2007. The Virginia Department of Historic Resources identified Witch Duck Bay and Witch Duck Point as where Sherwood's 1706 water test occurred. It's now known as Witch Duck Bay. And there are a lot of things in that area called Witch Duck, particularly one major thoroughfare that I used to travel all the time.
Huh.
So what I think it was, I feel like I feel like it was initially Witch Dunk, and somebody just misspelled it. That's all.
Oh, probably.
Anyways, those are the Virginia witch trials. So take that, Salem, stick that in your pipe and smoke it. We had the first, last, and the least deadly.
Damn. Well, I like the fact that none of them were killed. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, you had
Uh,
that one woman, but she was on a ship.
yes, 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 yes. She
Semantics,
wasn't.
red tape.
Yeah, she wasn't there. It was close,
Anytime I
but
think
not there.
pirates now, I think Johnny Depp. My life has been ruined.
Arr. He was a
Where's the
good
rum
pirate.
gone? It was a witch.
Why is the rum gone is always a fair question.
That is true. It is very much a fair
Because
question.
currently in my house, the rum is gone.
Why is the beer gone? Because of brew crime.
Luckily, there's still lots of beer in my keg right now.
Hey yo.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Brew Crime. You can find us on all social media platforms at Brew Crime. A Facebook group, Brew Crime the Group. If you'd like to support the show, head to patreon.com/brewcrime now. The money goes towards upgrading equipment and making the show that much better. You get one bonus episode a month, as well as early ad-free access to our episodes. So shout out to our Patreon supporters, True Crime Nana, Three Beers In Podcast, and the Faves of Our Lives. Peace.
A witch! The witch!
All cases in Brew Crime are written by Mike and JT or a writer we credit on the episode, and sources are put into our show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. Check out our store at tpublic.com/stores/brew-crime-podcast, where you can purchase gear like t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, pillows, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Brew Crime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution licensed audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo designed by Ben Greenberg. Thanks for listening to this episode of Brew Crime Podcast. Welcome to Brew Crime. So that's... Because that was just... So 3 pounds? So 3 pounds would be...
So you do the $400 times 300.
Oh, 300?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's the wrong one. That's Disturbed.
It is a little bit. It is a little bit. I was just gonna let it happen.